Hello students, today we're going to look at an extension of solving equations where there are variables on both sides of the equal sign. So we're calling it solving equations with variables on both sides. And when we say both sides, we mean both sides of the equal sign. So there'll be variables on both sides. So some things we need to know, there's a little vocabulary word we need to know, and that vocabulary word is coefficient. Okay, coefficient. The coefficient of the variable is the number, and I spelled number a little bit with the wrong letter right there, the number that precedes the variable. Okay? The number that precedes the variable, and precedes means to come before. Okay? So let's say we have a 3k. K is our variable, it's the letter that represents the unknown, and 3 is the coefficient, because 3 is the number that precedes the variable. What about negative 2m? In this case, m is our variable, it's the letter, and the coefficient of m is negative 2, because that's the number that precedes the variable. What about if I have 1/2 r? Well, r is the variable, like you know, and so 1/2 would be the coefficient of that variable r. And coefficient is a word that we're going to use a lot in the next coming videos and all year long as we're solving equations. So it's important that you realize that the coefficient is the number that precedes the variable. So here's an example of an equation that has variables on both sides of the equal sign. 4k minus 8 equals 2k plus 6. And we're always trying to find out what k equals. So here is my hint to you, my strong suggestion to you when we're solving equations with variables on both sides. Always start with the variable with the smallest coefficient. I'm going to say that again. Always start with the variable with the smallest coefficient. So I have 4k and 2k. Those are my two variables. Which one has the smallest coefficient? Well, if the coefficient is the number that comes before the k, the smallest one is 2. So now I'm going to still do those opposite operations. We're always doing opposite operations to solve equations. But now I'm just going to start with this smallest variable, which is 2k. Well, the 2k is positive, so the opposite of that is negative, so I've got to subtract 2k on both sides. Okay? Because there's not a sign there, we know it's positive, so I'm subtracting 2k from both sides. 4k minus 2k is 2k, and I still have the minus 8 equals 6. Those 2k's cancel out, no more left, the only thing left is 6. Now I'm at a two-step equation, just like we've been doing recently. So I've got 2k minus 8 equals 6, I'm going to do opposite operation, and I'm going to add 8 to both sides, and so I'm left with 2k equals 14. Now we're at a one-step equation. You know it's 2k, that means 2 times k. So the opposite of multiplication is division. So I'm going to divide by 2, and I get k equals 7. Again, very methodical process. If you start with the variable with the smallest coefficient, you'll save yourself a couple of steps in the long run. So here's the next example of solving an equation with variables on both sides. 9 minus 3m equals 2m plus 4. Okay? So again, the hint is, or the strong suggestion is to look for the variable with the smallest coefficient. Well, my variable is m, you're right, and so I have negative 3m and 2m. Which one is smallest? Here's where it's tricky. This is negative 3, and that's positive 2. Which one's smaller? The negative 3 is the smallest, so I'm going to start with the negative 3m, and I'm going to do whatever's opposite. This is minus 3m, so I'm going to add 3m to both sides. Plus 3m plus 3m. Remember, the m's have to go with the m's because we're combining like terms, and we can't do, you can't add an m to something that doesn't have an m. Okay? So these cancel out, and all I'm left with is 9 on this side. And then I have 2m plus 3m, and 2 plus 3 is 5. 5m. Okay? I've got 2 m's and 3 m's, and if you have 2 m's and 3 m's, and you put them together, you get 5 m's. And then plus 4. Now we're back to a two-step equation. So I subtract 4 from both sides, and I get 5 equals 5m. And then I do the opposite operation, which would be divide by 5. So n equals 1. Again, check your negatives and your positives, and make sure you start with the smallest variable. Now, I'm going to tell you, you can do it a different way by starting with any variable that you want to, but if you start with the smallest variable, most of the time you're going to end up with positives, and that saves you from having to deal with negatives. So here's our next example of solving an equation with variables on both sides. M over 2 plus 5 equals m over 4 minus 3. Now this one is a little bit tricky, okay? Because there's really something we got to do here. M over 2 is the same thing as 1/2 m. And you might want to rewrite it, instead of doing m over 2, you might want to rewrite it so you do 1/2 m. Plus 5 equals. Now if this was 1/2, then what is this? 1/4. And I'm going to tell you why. The coefficient of the m right now is a 1. So I've got 1m over 4. Well, if you take that m out, you can rewrite it as 1/4 m and then minus 3. It's important to do that because when you're combining like terms, you got to know what your coefficients are in order to be able to add or subtract. Okay? So now I've got 1/2 m plus 5 equals 1/4 m minus 3. Which one of those is my smallest variable? So here's what you got to think. 1/2 or 1/4? Well, I always like to think of money. What's half of a dollar? 50 cents. What's a fourth of a dollar? A quarter. Which one's bigger? 50 cents. So the smallest one must be a quarter. So the smallest variable is 1/4 m. So it's positive right now. Even though that negative is right there and there's a minus sign right there, that minus sign has nothing to do with the 1/4 m. The minus sign is with the 3. So the 1/4 is positive, so I have to subtract 1/4 m from both sides. Okay? Those 1/4s are going to cancel out. And then I gotta go, what is 1/2 times 1/4? Use your calculator. If you just type in 1 divided by 2 minus 1 divided by 4, because remember to put that in the calculator, use the divide by sign, equals, it'll give you the answer in a fraction form. Wow. And I'll tell you what the answer is. It's 1/4. n plus 5 equals negative 3. Now I'm back at a two-step equation. So I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. And I get 1/4 m equals negative 3 minus 5 is, you're exactly right, negative 8. And because this one where it gets tricky too. I'm going to divide by 1/4 on both sides. Divide by 1/4. I don't know why I put a minus there. Okay? Divide by 1/4. Those 1/4s cancel out. I'm going to write the answer over here. M equals 8 divided by 1/4. Again, use your calculator, but here's the trick. To put a fraction in the calculator, you really need to put it in parentheses. So you do 8 divided by parentheses 1 divided by 4 close parentheses. When you do that, the answer is 32. So the final answer to this equation is m equals 32. Now I know that's a lot of stuff in one equation, and we are definitely going to be able to help you maneuver all of this stuff, but just remember, opposite operations when you are solving equations.